are zombie pirate gunnery mobs, all variants, useful trash in patch 6.3.4. See, there's no shame in being trash if you are useful trash, cost-effective trash, and so forth. I'm doing this video in part because once upon a time, when I was asked if such and such unit was any good, I was asked, is there any unit you find completely unredeemable and no good whatsoever? I cited the pistol gunnery mob. I felt it had been left behind by the changes going into Total War Warhammer 3. We're going to look it over in detail, but I'll add the rest too, because Pirate Cove will be a more effective C rating faction in Tides of Torment, so it's relevant again. Yes! The Pistols Gunnery Mob comes on Ultra Unit scale at 120 entities with 7,650 health between them. This means we are not using a 160 entity unit that can shoot. Still, 120 entities is on the higher side. Think Goblin Archers as compared to Empire Crossbowmen. Armor is 15, Leadership is a bottom of the rum barrel 35, Speed 25, Charge Speed 26. You see why we consider them trashy, yes. Melee attack begins at a paltry 14, attack interval 4.4 seconds, is actually slower than the norm, no splash damage whatsoever. Melee defense begins at 6. That's right, 6. Weapon strength 15 is split base 13 and armor piercing 2, so it's comfortably below anything you'd get from even skeleton warriors, which will soundly out-brawl this unit. Charge bonus is 7, and mass is 90. Being undead, there's no fleeing, only crumbling, and these units are aquatic. They drowned long ago and need not fear water now. That applies to all of the others, all cover. What doesn't apply to the others all cover is Vanguard deployment. That's specific to the pistols. So, let's go over the pistols as a ranged weapon here. Ammunition begins at 22. This is to say, this isn't a super limited ammunition unit like Slayer Pirates. Range of 90 is what you expect for pistols. Missile strength is officially 13. Each actual hit inflicts base 12 and armor piercing 2 damage. Reload time is 11 seconds to start. Total accuracy the standard 20 to start. Calibration distance 65 meters means they're more inaccurate past that range. Calibration area 2.4 meters means they're not pinpoint accurate by default, but a lot of units are much worse. And there is multi-entity penetration, penetration cap small, max targets of 2 perforated after the first. They have to be close together and all, but at least it's possible, and we usually think better of other races' missile units with that kind of penetration. In addition to Hide and Forest and Causes Fear as an undead unit, and the aforementioned Vanguard deployment, the pistol version is a fire whilst moving unit, though 1, it moves pretty slowly, 2, it's a frontal arc firing unit, but yes, it will fire while advancing. Let's proceed through the other versions. The Bombers variant requires 450 gold to recruit and 113 upkeep. You still have 120 entities. All of our stats are exactly the same until we get to the missile part. And that's notable because they are worse for the other 2 variants. Ammunition begins at 5 volleys. Range of 55 is pretty short. Missile strength is officially 16 and is flaming attack, and not much in this faction is. Each direct hit inflicts 1 base damage only. The real damage is from detonation radius 3 meters, base 12, and armor piercing 3 damage within that to all entities caught within. Of course, that lands differently against a skeleton warrior than a minotaur. Of course, consider there are 120 bomb chuckers at full strength. Projectile of grenade, don't expect shields to help with the boom. Total accuracy of 20 is standard as a starting point. Calibration distance 50 means there is very little extra inaccuracy. Calibration area 2.0 meters means there's not that much spread, but you're still not pinpoint against single dwarf heroes. No multi-target penetration, it's boom on impact. The unit is not fire whilst moving. Now, I'll just say the footage should make this clear, but there are diminishing returns when using this on a big infantry unit. However, if it catches an infantry unit in a heavy bombardment, that unit will be in pain. This unit dishes its damage out fast, but it's also a lot of damage, and as I said, completely disrespecting any shield carried by the enemy. so it's Dark Elves and High Elves counterplay. Moving on to the handgunners. Recruited for 550 gold and 138 upkeep. A lot of the stats are the same for melee. Here's where they differ. Melee attack begins at 8 or 6 less. Charge bonus is 2 or 5 less. I mean, that's really pathetic. For ranged, ammunition is back to the old standard value of 22 volleys. Range of 145 is not anything to be ashamed of. Missile damage is 22 officially, with each shot inflicting base 8 and armor-piercing 20 damage. That means, against a flagellant, that's 28 damage. Its musket trajectory, reload time 13 seconds base, total accuracy 20 is the standard, and no better. Calibration distance 90, so a considerable part of the range where they're less accurate. Calibration area 3.5 meters means quite a bit of drift even under optimal conditions, and no multi-target penetration. Compared to other factions' handguns, they hit hard, they fire slower, and they are considerably less tight in their groupings. But gunnery wights exist to improve those issues, just saying the default has those weaknesses. But when they hit hard. Hand cannons are the odd man out. Basically, this is a blunderbuss before Chaos Dwarfs were a thing, an Iron Hail Gunner before Cathay was a thing. Recruited for 600 gold and 150 upkeep, the melee stats are equal to the previous handgunner's unit. For ranged, ammunition begins at 22 again. Range is 90, like pistols. Missile damage of 34 is not like pistols. Each flechette does 4 base and 12 armor-piercing damage, 3 projectiles per shot. Musket trajectory, like the handgunners, reload time of 14 is slightly higher than the handgunners, which is not a good thing. Total accuracy is still 20 to start, calibration distance of 45 means the spread gets a lot bigger at an earlier juncture, and that's with a 3 projectile weapon. Calibration area of 3.5 meters is as not tight as the handguns, and that damages your ability to snipe small characters. There is no multi-target penetration, but as I've said, dead entities stop no bullets. This is a lesson that must be stated again and again when units like this are concerned, and Grudge Rakers too. Now, to wrap up the stats section, this is a faction mechanic, but we must remember it. All Vampire Coast missile units with 80% or more ammunition when launching a ranged attack gets plus 30% to ranged damage, doesn't matter what kind of damage it is, in other words, including the bombers, with the first 2 grenades. 30% is a lot. Those initial blows mean something. Now, what about summoning the pistols unit? Yeah, you can do that. Lore of the Deeps doesn't do it. It's actually overcasting the zombie summon spell with a Vampire Coast Lore of Vampires caster. All of a sudden, you have a base version of Pistol Gunnery Mob, preferably behind the enemy or flanking, and therefore getting around the pesky shields. All of a sudden, it's firing, and those first shots absolutely will be 30% stronger than normal. The targets are getting morale debuffs from being shot, and being shot from the flanks helps too. Well, it helps you, it doesn't help them. So this is not at all a useless unit as a summons. You just need the right circumstances against engaged melee units. The rest is going to come down to things like firing arcs. Bombers, unlike the others, have some chance at effectively cleaning walls, though the AI abandons walls pretty early nowadays. The pistols, I was told when I put this unit down a couple of years ago that they fire at a relatively low level and therefore are more likely to hit infantry. But in making this video, I don't really think that's it. I think we are simply seeing the 2.4 meters calibration area at work. They are inherently more accurate than handguns and hand cannons. And you'll see in the footage that they have this tendency to miss high. And that's their 3.5 meter calibration area at work. And that means they're doing less damage against infantry in a lot of cases than they would do against, let's say, masked ogres. And let me be clear, enough of them can utterly destroy masked ogres, but they need time to get it done, and that's time they may not have. So with that context, let's push on. In the redline skills, Reanimated Marksman applies to all of the above units, an excellent reason to cover them in one go. At 3 pips, they get plus 18% ammunition and plus 8% missile strength. Now, that's far from nothing for missile strength, but the ammunition presents an interesting situation. You're unlikely to go through that much ammo in a normal battle, aside from the bombers, because they'll go through that really fast, but against multiple armies, you really would be running out. At rank 7 and up, ensorcelled weapons would grant armor plus 12, missile strength another plus 12%, and spell resistance 15%, which makes them more resistant, far from immune to being erased by magic, which, given their slow speed, is a massive threat to a lot of Vampire Coast armies. In the tech tree, there is a lot to go over, which is another reason to do this video as one big bunch, despite the pitfalls. Silver musket balls and cutlasses as a bonus versus infantry of plus 3 to the deckhand mobs and gunnery mobs. It's not much, but when you start this miserable, every bit helps. Hardened pirate scum gives the whole class of units recruit rank plus 2. Marines upkeep provides minus 15% upkeep to the entire class. That adds up, it's quite a large percentage compared to most reductions out there. Unliving reflexes grants melee defense plus 5. To the whole class. Like I said earlier, when it's this bad, every bit helps. Gunnery crews, the start of the ranged tilted part of the tree, grants a blanket missile strength plus 5% to everything here. There is another missile strength plus 5% with the black powder oxide skill running. Stolen Imperial Ordnance gives plus 20% to the armor-piercing missile component of damage. This means much less for pistols and bombers and much more for handguns and hand cannons, and for them is a critical technology. Percussion caps increases ammunition by plus 25% for the class, which gets even bombers to disturbing levels with any redline specking at all. Steadier aim provides plus 10% range to all of them. Salvage crews grants plus 10% casualty replenishment to the class. Now, I'm pretty sure when this sort of thing is used, it's not plus 10% to your base replenishment. It's plus 10% to the percentage of the unit that's replenished. So if it was 5%, it would be 15% now. It's not a small difference, but is meant for your zombie masses only. There's only a couple of fleet offices of real impact. Gunnery Master can make a Lord give an extra plus 12% missile strength to them in his army. I'll link to my last full video on the Gunnery White, but be aware they've changed some of these buffs to 55 meters from 35 meters in a big wave of updates earlier on. That's a very serious boost to what the hero can do for you, but that's its own subject. So how do we use these zombie pirate gunnery mobs? Now that I've convinced myself the pistols are no longer complete trash, well, you still have to understand they have a very bad time against early High Elf and Dark Elf armies, and frankly, lots of opponents. But if allowed to quietly potshot, they can really get the damage piling up to almost adequate levels. They are scavengers, there to cull weaklings, rather than be a key way to turn around battles against the strong. But if you are patient, remember they fire whilst moving. So if you have them shamble to a good firing position, they will actually perform to a point. And as you can see, they can get buffed to some impressive levels. The bombers, it's not complicated. These are your ideal solution to asymmetrical destruction of low-tier troops with big, fat shields, like High Elves and Dark Elves like I mentioned earlier, giving pistols and others so much trouble. Like similar units, you're getting diminishing returns the more a formation is whittled down, and also the more it's armored. But at that point, just let the pistols take over. Target the thickest units, blobs, and so on first. The more entities the enemy has, the better the matchup. They'll do better against clan rats than Blackguard. I hadn't addressed it yet, so let's go over guard mode now. This was working really well for blue and pink horrors in the videos I made for them a couple of weeks back. In particular, it might break down during big battles, but in smaller scale situations, it may still be the difference because usually you have tons of ammo, and the shots have a much better chance of turning the tide for you than the pathetic melee evident. Every shot you can get off matters. Handguns have really high overall power potential, but are especially vulnerable. Hand cannons have obscene power potential, but you can disrupt them too. hence the guard mode mentioned. What cripples hand cannons is operating at pistol range with worse than handgunner reload time, but they are really powerful potentially, so if you can keep them firing at all while they're being engaged in melee, at least they have a chance. The rest, like the firing angles and however much they shoot high if they're handguns or hand cannons, is to be seen to be believed, and that's all here. I'll reiterate that class-wide they are vulnerable to spells because those hit points are only decent and are split among 120 entities on Ultra. Area effect spells doing X amount of damage per entity in a given area will be more effective against them. It's baked in, and gunnery wights were made to make them sing. And not just horrific sounding shanties. I mean, the sounds of their guns are more beautiful when they are more frequent and result in more screaming on the other end. There's also a Lore of the Deep spell for magical attack and other benefits, but it's on a single unit only, so it'll be fairly rare you want to use it on gunnery mobs. A 55 meter boost? Goodness, yes! Abuse that as much as you can and get those dragons on the ground. Maybe for good. Take care, and have fun making your enemies so leaky they'll be taking on seawater too.